Hello, this is Jimbo from the YouTube channel Jimbo, South Dakota, and this is the Hog House Chronicles podcast. And sitting next to me here, I have a friend from church, Gwen Thompson, and he agreed to an interview. Going to tell us about his military experiences. And did you grow up in this area, or how did you grow up? What was that like?
Well, I grew up about 5 miles from here on a family farm that my great-grandfather homesteaded, and I have a sister and a younger brother. I lived on the home place till I started working for Uncle Sam.
Mm-hmm.
And like I say, the rest is history.
Yeah. So how was it that you came about to be working for Uncle Sam?
Well, August of 66, I got this letter in the mail that said, "Greetings from the President.
Uh-huh.
You've been ordered to report," and that was it.
All right. You were one of those guys then.
Yeah, I was one of the U.S., as they called us. Not R.A. was regular Army, and then us draftees that were U.S.'s.
Oh, okay. So it was Army that you got drafted into?
Yes.
So is that how draft notices worked? It was for like a specific service, or did you have like a choice of service?
We didn't really have a choice, or they didn't ask us if we did.
Sure.
Now, I've talked to different guys that they showed up at the induction center, and they said, well, the Marines need so many bodies, and that's where you went.
Okay. I didn't figure there was much choice in the matter.
No.
But it sounded like they could adjust fairly late in the game if they needed to.
Yeah, I worked with a couple of guys that said they were drafted in the Marines.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't think the Marines drafted anyone. Well, if you talk to a hardcore Marine, nobody got drafted in the Marines.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah.
Based on their heritage.
Right.
Because there's no such thing as an ex-Marine either.
That's correct.
Former Marines.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what age were you when you went in, and how did that end up? What was your experience with getting drafted?
I was 20 years old. I'd gone to college for a year and a half, ran out of money, and figured, well, Uncle Sam's going to employ me sooner or later, so I stayed on the family farm until I got drafted.
Mm-hmm.
We reported to the induction center in Sioux Falls, South Dakota on the 20th of September. There was 3 of us from Canton.
Mm-hmm.
And then they flew us to El Paso, Texas. Of course, first time I'd been on a big plane.
Yeah, same for me when I went to basic.
And we got to Denver and sat on the tarmac for about 3 hours because we were having plane trouble.
Mm-hmm.
And flew into Texas. They bussed us over to some big shop someplace and says, okay, we got to do the paperwork. This was 1 o'clock in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
So we sat there till 4 or 5 o'clock doing paperwork and getting pricked and poked. And then they took us to, okay, you can shack out for a little while. And that's when it started.
Mm-hmm.
We sat at the induction center 3 days waiting for the rest of the company to fill up. But we had about, I think seemed like there was 24, 25 of us from the Midwest here that left out of Sioux Falls. And the rest of them are beach boys from L.A. and out in that California neck of the woods.
Yeah, it's definitely a melting pot.
Yes, definitely.
It seems like most people I've talked to, about the basic training, there's usually somebody from a state that you don't even use their name. You like call them by their state.
Right.
Hey, California, get over here. New York.
Yeah, we had quite a bunch. I mean, there was quite a few Hispanics from just down the road in New Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
And that, but all in all, it was a pretty good bunch. We had 2 guys, 1 kid from Beersford that was, I don't think he ever ran a day in his life till he got to basic training.
Uh-huh.
And then another little Hispanic guy that lost about 100 pounds and a clean set of uniform by the time he left boot camp.
Mm-hmm.
But boot camp wasn't bad. I mean, learned a lot, but I had ROTC training for a year and a half in college, so I knew how to march. Now the rest, 90% of them didn't.
Uh-huh.
So it was interesting to, like you say, a melting pot to get everybody together. But it didn't take long. I mean, everybody was a bunch of kids. I think there were maybe 3 guys older than me in the company, and that was all the rest of them were 18, 19-year-olds,
Mm-hmm.
a few 17s.
Right.
But I thought it was going to be worse than it was, but as long as you had thick skin and were used to getting yelled at.
Right. Right. How long was your basic training? Do you remember?
Well, we showed up on the 20th. I think we got into our company about the 23rd, and we graduated day after Thanksgiving. So 8 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah, about 8 weeks.
Yeah. So since Vietnam was going on, they didn't like shorten it or
No.
anything. It just was your standard basic training.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So then did you go to another base for like more in-depth training before they shipped you over, or was
No.
it straight from basic?
We went to Fort Lewis, Washington for AIT, which was light weapons infantry. And from there, of course, you don't want to end up in Fort Lewis, Washington in December and January. It's the wettest part of the year out there, so it was enjoyable in the water. You know. But I can always remember fall out, put on your overshoes, run out the rifle range, or they'd wait for you to get wet, and then they'd tell you to put the boots on. You know, typical military.
Right. So did you do sports and things in high school that physically help you get ready for basic training?
Basically just football, but in Canton, if you played football, you had to go out for track, so it was track and football.
Sure.
And, of course, I get to put in a little dibs on the class of 64. You know, thought we were special at the time.
Yeah, they didn't have state tournaments and stuff start until like the mid-'80s or
Right.
something like that. So,
But, yeah, high school was, I was in decent shape. I was 170 pounds in high school, and I think I got out of boot camp, I was on like 176. So I was, fairly decent shape.
right. You're able to gain a little instead of just running it off.
Right.
Yeah. So, what was your trip like? Them getting you over to Vietnam?
I didn't go to Vietnam.
You didn't? Okay.
I didn't.
Here, I'm assuming.
Oh.
I'm assuming.
I
Yeah.
knock
Tell
on
me.
wood, I was one of very few that didn't go over.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good.
Yeah, I had, like you say, MOS was 11 Bravo, and it's like I was just waiting for orders. And, like I say, I always told the guys at boot camp, I said, do what they tell you to do and get you 2 years in and go home. And I got orders for Fort Knox, Kentucky. I was down there about 4 months, I guess. And I got orders for Fort Ord, California.
Okay.
And out there we were in an experimental command, they called it. And played around with, the starlight scopes was the big thing then. And then the, what was it? They call it the Stoner machine gun, which turned out to be I don't even know what they call it now. But I guess they call it the SAW right now.
Okay.
And that was the first time I'd seen a SAW. And they ran experiments with that. I was out, like I said, I was out there 14 months, got discharged, headed for home, and then I started working for John Morrell in Sioux Falls. And one of the guys I worked with looked down, saw my combat boots, and said, you want to join the reserves? Well, that was the last thing I'd thought about. And I said, I'm tired of playing infantry. He said, we're quartermaster laundry. I said, what do you mean? Well, we wash clothes and run a PLO point. That's all you do for 2 weeks? Yeah.
What's a PLO point?
Petroleum, lubes, oil.
Oh,
We just
okay.
actually all we did pump gas. And so first couple summer camps I went there, and then they decided to change us to a decon unit, chemical decon unit,
Oh, fun.
with mop gear and all that sort of stuff. And I was there in that till I held it almost 6 years in. But then I'd started farming, so then it's like my dad said, you better take a pick. What are you going to do? So I got out of the reserves, started farming for a while, and then I got into maintenance at the plant. So that was 6 and 7 days a week. So, and that helped pay the bills. So I just quit farming and started working full time there.
Okay. So you spent how many years in the Army?
2 active and 4 reserves.
Okay. So you spent that on stateside.
Right.
And then you said 4 reserves.
Right.
So then that finished your 6-year commitment. Okay. Then I think, if I'm not mistaken, I think you have maybe 2 years of inactive reserve after that, maybe. So it's a total of 8. I'm not sure if they had that then.
I didn't really get credit for that when I got around to retiring.
Right.
But at that time, I wasn't too concerned about it because you didn't get nothing for 6 years active or training.
Right. Remember Don Paulson? We talked to him just a little bit ago and talked about he did reserves afterward, but not right away because he said the same thing. That's the last thing that was on my mind when getting out was that.
Right. Anyway, I started working with a couple of guys that were in the Seabees. That's Navy. Not too many people know about the Seabees. They're like the combat engineers on the Army side. Mm-hmm. And one of them was original World War II Seabee. And he had like 39 years in total with the reserve and active duty.
Okay.
And they persuaded me to give it a try for a year, and 18 years later, I retired.
Yeah, because you're wearing the U.S. Navy veteran hat there. So that was the Naval Reserve that you joined?
Yes.
In Sioux Falls there?
Right.
Okay. You spent 18 years there?
I was up there for about 9, I guess, and then I transferred to the unit in Sioux City.
Oh, okay. All right. Did you ever meet a guy named Chuck Stark in the Naval Reserves? I think he was active duty.
I don't know, the names,
one of the full-time guys.
The name rings a bell, but...
yeah, there's a real good friend of mine, actually. His likeness is burned into this bar. We have some guys that we've been going out to the Black Hills on a horseback trip. This will be our 28th year straight. And Rex is the guy that owns this Palomino out here that I'm boarding, and his dad was Chuck Stark. And he's passed since, but he spent some years at that unit in Sioux Falls there. So, yeah.
I can't put a face and a name to it, but the name sounds familiar.
Sure. Yeah, and I think that whole facility's been torn out now, I think.
Yeah, it's all parking lot, I guess, now.
Yeah, it's pretty flat down there. I think there was some Army facilities there, too. I think maybe they've taken
Yeah,
out.
it was the Army Reserve was next door.
Right next door. Yeah. Okay. All right. So was there anybody else in your family that had served in the military at all? Or?
Well, I had 3 uncles that served in World War II, and my daughter just retired from 20 years active duty in the Army.
In the Army? Okay. What did she do?
She was a chemical officer. That was her branch, I guess, but I don't know if she ever was in a chemical unit. She was everywhere else, but...
So can you describe what a chemical unit is?
Well, basically you're going around decontaminating any nuclear contamination.
Nuclear, chemical, biological.
Right.
Okay, I wondered if that's the type of unit you were talking about.
Yeah.
Because, each of the services has some of that. And up in the Air Guard here and in the Air Force, I dealt with that with the Air Force and decontaminating pilots to try to get them ready to go out on their next mission and stuff. But, yeah, so we probably all wore very similar equipment, I would guess.
Yeah. For us, it was decontaminating people, individuals, as well as equipment. Mm-hmm. Fortunately, we didn't have to do that other than training. But,
right.
Nothing like putting on mop gear when it's 100 degrees out.
Yeah. And it's going to Texas in September for basic training. That was some good heat training for you down there. For basic training, I went down there for my youngest daughter's graduation from basic, and for the Air Force down there, I had 2 of them do it. But the second one was in August, graduation. And I did actually get a little sick from the heat down there at my older age at that time, and it's not fun.
No.
It's not fun, especially wearing that mop gear.
I know it. We had butyl rubber suits on when we first started with it, and that stuff would burn you. You know, the rubber on your bare skin, and you get done with training, and you pour out a cup of water out of your boots, and
Yeah, we are. By the time I got in, we were wearing cotton inserts inside the butyl gloves, so that helped a lot. Soaked up a little bit of the sweat, but yeah. What was your most rewarding part of being in the military and serving?
well, just the camaraderie of the people you served with. You know, there's a lot of guys that you thought, man, what a jerk he is, and then you live with him and work with him and find out he's a hell of a guy.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I made chief in the reserves, and that's kind of a step up from the enlisted. Chief starts out at E7, E7s, 8s, and 9s.
Okay, I was going to ask you which.
And that was a little bit closer camaraderie also.
Mm-hmm.
But then you got a lot of guys underneath you have to take care of also. That's your job, take care of your people.
Right.
That was the key.
So you didn't get to do any overseas time at all when you're in the Navy Reserves, or what did you do for a bunch of your 2-week camps?
Well, I spent 2 different tours in Guam,
Oh, nice.
and that was rather interesting. Of course, I was equipment operator, but with my electrical training, I was assigned to help get a asphalt batch plant running that hadn't been running for 3 years, and that was a challenge. I ran out of time before we got it all fixed up, but the control panel in the head house looked like it had been eaten up by a bunch of mice. It just balls of wire all over the place, but we did get some of it running, and then of course I got to detonate some C4 out of in the quarry that we were blasting out of. That was interesting. Didn't realize how far that stuff would fly. We were in a bunker, and it went over our heads about a block. But that was interesting there. And then I went to Okinawa 2 different times.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, driving on the wrong side of the road is always a challenge when you don't do it.
Right.
But there again, it was at that time I was the chief, so it was basically watching over the guys, you know, on their projects. They had it spread out. We were in, I think we did a big paving project, laying down asphalt one time, and I can't remember what the other project was, but it was a couple times where we had to stop training because it got too darn hot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the black flag comes up and screeching halt. But,
Right.
and then I got to, I guess in Guam, I got to experience my first earthquake.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that was kind of exciting.
You could feel it pretty good?
Well, I happened to be at the post exchange walking down the aisle, and pretty soon some of the toothpaste and stuff started falling off the shelf.
Oh, really?
And people started screaming, and what's the problem here? You know, I never experienced it, but it wasn't a real big deal for me anyway. The people that I guess that were used to got more scared than I was.
Yeah,
I didn't know better probably.
Yeah, they probably had some worse experiences
Yeah.
earlier on. I hadn't felt any until I was up in Alaska, where my oldest daughter lives, and I've felt it. I think 3 of them on 2 different occasions up there, and the second one was bigger than the first one, and it made me stand in the doorway, grab the 2 grandkids, and stand in the doorway of the bedroom. But yeah,
Yeah, it's when I got back to the base. I get back there and there wasn't one person in the barracks. Everybody was out on the yard saying, "Okay, is it going to go or not?" The after tremors were worse than the shake itself.
right. I've heard that. Mm-hmm. So how long you did the Okinawa twice and Guam a couple times. Were those 2-week trips, or were they extended a little?
They were 17 days, just because of the distance.
Right.
And then we did a couple of course, you always have field exercises. With the way the CBs are structured, you had 1 week or 1 2-weeker where you did projects, and then another one where you went to classes and that type of training, and then third session was playing war games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So CB is strictly a naval term?
Yeah, I believe so. I don't know if you can go back to the John Wayne and the Fighting Seabees. That's kind of a history in itself. But, of course, like I say, that was an old movie. But
yeah,
that's how they got started.
Yes, I got a bunch of John Wayne over here in Clint Eastwood, and I was just asked about the Seabees movie. I'll have to take a look and see if I have it. But then they were thinking maybe we're talking Green Berets. But since you mentioned that movie, I'll definitely make sure I go take a look.
Well, they did have a few Seabees in the Green Berets also.
Sure.
But
got to mention John Wayne when you got a couple of us older fellows talking here.
Fighting Seabees and John Wayne. Yeah.
So did you have much? I'm guessing you probably didn't have much free time at all during those couple of weeks, or were you able to get out and see some things in Guam and Okinawa?
Get out too much. Of course, like I say, if you did, you had to hoof it. Mm-hmm. But for a few of our trips from one side of the island to the other were through a couple of the towns or whatever. Mm-hmm. And Kadena was just down the road from us a little ways, so we got to go by there and see just about every plane that the Air Force ever invented.
Oh, nice.
Was there. But, it was interesting talking to the guys about how they transported their heavy equipment from point A to point B. And says, we got to take those dozers right through downtown, and everybody's supposed to get out of the way. I said, what happens if they don't? Well, they lose a roof or whatever. They didn't stop for nothing, you know.
Did you see anything that really surprised you at all in either of those places?
When I first landed in Guam, when they opened the door and you could smell that jungle rot just coming into the plane, I thought, boy, I don't know if I can handle this for 2 weeks or whatever, but after a day it was gone. Mm-hmm. But in Guam, we did go to one place where there was 2 Japanese Army guys that spent, they were there at World War II, and they didn't, I'm trying to think what year it was that the last guys finally surrendered. One died, and the other guy surrendered, and he'd been there for over 30 years.
Oh, wow.
And, of course, the Japanese weren't real favored in Guam.
Right.
So anybody that got caught after Japanese, most of them got out of there, were not treated well.
Right. Yeah, I remember smelling that jungle rot in Singapore and also Curacao. And that's the one thing I've told some people about. We live in the northern tier, and then, the winters up here, and people talk about that. But then I talk about the jungle rot thing was like, especially certain ditches you'd walk by, it's always smells of things rotting year round.
Yeah.
And I was like, we got these winters up here. It breaks that stuff down, a little bit more. Of course, it's different types of animals and vegetation. But that's one way of me rationalizing living up here in the north. Yeah. What's the funniest thing you ever experienced in your military career?
Oh, gosh. I don't know, the thing that always sticks in my mind where I got a nickname, I was in the Army at that time, and our company got stuck for guard duty over Labor Day weekend. And they started out top of the alphabet going all the way down, and they had one guy left when they got to the T's. And I knew Wade Taylor was ahead of me. I'm sitting back, and first sergeant calls my name, and I kind of went unglued for a little bit. Well, and that's when they started calling me TH and Wade TA. Mm-hmm. But that was it was wasn't real humorous, but since I got stuck on that 3-day guard duty, but it was kind of funny that we always, every time I heard my name called, or as they said, TH, it always like, okay, here we go again.
Mm-hmm. Had to labor on Labor Day.
Yeah.
How about what's the most important thing you learned in your service, you think? Or a couple things?
Well, there's, I guess, just the amount of, I don't know, work, whatever, to get everything coordinated to go somewhere. You know, we were out in California at pre-mob and Desert Storm, and we showed up, and according to paperwork, we had 700 and some odd people in our battalion. And by the time everybody got to California, we were down to like five and a half. We had 100 and some ghosts that were still on paperwork but hadn't processed out.
Oh, wow.
And that was something that said, how in the world did, can you lose 100 and some people? But there it is on paper.
Mm-hmm.
So, and with that, some of our people got transferred to other battalions because we were over strength. So we had some guys that went active duty with NMCB 17 and, in Puerto Rico. Some of them went to Guam. But, there was that's kind of a jerk losing some of your people to other outfits when you actually end up short.
Right.
Unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, it all depends how you look at it. After 2 weeks of training to go overseas, they said, well, we're not sending any more Seabees to Afghanistan, or Iraq, I should say. So we didn't. We just turned around, got on the plane, went home again. Mm-hmm. But it was a kind of a surprise because they told us back in, I guess, November, December, well, you're going to take this active duty battalion spot in Puerto Rico, and then the next month it was, you're going to Guam. And then it's like, okay, in July you're going to Iraq. And then we weren't going anywhere. Well, we had one-way plane ticket to California, so we were like, okay, I don't think we're coming home. But we accepted the fact. Most of us guys is, okay, let's go and get it over with.
Yeah, once you get in that frame of mind, it's just what I call go mode.
Yeah. And most of the guys that had that frame of mind were older guys in the battalion. We had a lot of old guys, not so many young ones, but the young guys were more worried about it going than we were.
Right.
So,
did you ever have any thoughts of, hindsight looking back, of maybe wishing you had stayed active duty or not, or did that cross your mind at all?
at that time, no, I never did. And of course, like I say, I didn't expect to go reserves either, but as my son had complained about his first paycheck in the Navy was $660, and I said I never got $660 the whole time I was on active duty.
Right.
We got a pay raise, and it went up to $440, I think it was. So yeah, wages wise was something you didn't figure was going to make a career out of, especially for if you were going to have a family and that. But a lot of guys did. Of course, some of them didn't have any structure at home or no family life or whatever. So Uncle Sam was their best.
Right. So how many years, I might have missed it, how many years when you got out of the Army, part-time reserves, and went into the Navy Reserve?
I got out Army Reserve in 74, and I think it was 84 that I went into the Navy Reserve.
So there's a pretty good span in between there. So you did the farming for how long, and then you went into, what was it? You're a master electrician, is that?
Yeah, I'm a journeyman electrician.
Journeyman.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I was trying to think. We went where I live now. I've lived there 50 years. I moved out in June of 74. And my oldest boy was born in October of 74. That's the way I can keep track of his age. But so it was probably about 10 years, I suppose, was farming before I decided I was making more money in the pig house than I was farming. So, I gave that up, and then I got into maintenance, and then that took up just about every Saturday and a lot of Sundays.
Mm-hmm.
So that pretty much put the kibosh to my farming.
So you were in electrical work, and then you went into maintenance at the factory.
Went into maintenance and then got into the electrical part.
Oh, after the fact. Okay.
Yeah.
I see.
Yeah. I tried to get in there the day I started, and I was there 18 years before I finally got a chance to move over to the mechanical division.
You're a patient man.
Well, standing on the production line, not a good thing.
No, not at all. The being able to be a citizen soldier without being full time, like here, I was able to buy this acreage, been here 31 years, yet retired with 35 years military. Had a little active duty behind me, but not very much. What did it mean to you to be a citizen soldier?
Well, it's kind of hard to explain. I think I told us one of the chiefs in Sioux City about it. I said, you put on that uniform. I says, you stand a little taller, a little straighter. You have a different perspective of life when you're on that uniform. It does. I don't know. It almost makes a guy drop a tear once in a while when you think about it, because it's I was proud to serve the Army, but I figured my mindset that they're going to have me for 2 years and then I'll go home and say good enough. But it was a challenge sometimes, but I really deep down in I realized how much of an American I really am.
Actually, that's how I got started doing this. I'll go ahead and tell this story a little bit. I have a neighbor here, and his dad served in World War II, and is part of the Hudson. Can't remember if it's a VFW.
Legion. American Legion.
Okay. And we were watching the newest Midway movie, and I got talking with him. It was just he and I, the guy and his son, my neighbor over here, Don. And we watched that Midway, and I had a couple drinks watching that, but I just started feeling it burn inside of me, it was pretty action packed, of course. Right. Not every day was action packed for every military member, but just, I talked to Don afterward about his dad's service, and, there were some stories that he had told and a lot that he didn't. And I said, you kind of got the glory part of the fighter pilots in the movie, but, there's thousands of people behind that person supporting, which is just as important. And so that's how I kind of got that's how I got the idea to start doing this and just letting people tell their stories.
Yeah, I know. I knew Don's dad.
Yes, figured you
through
probably
the Legion,
did.
Yeah. He was one of the oldest ones we had there. He's a good guy.
Yeah, very good.
And he's got a nephew that's in our unit too.
So, are you a part of any other of the organizations, or
just the American Legion?
Yeah, down there. Yeah. It's a pretty active unit down there.
Yeah, it's we've got over right around 100 paying due members. Not you don't have that many show up for the meetings, but usually probably 15 to 20 most of the time show up at the meetings. But it's a good group. We're pretty active with helping out the community where we can. I think one of the things that stuck in my mind most, there was a gal that, I'm not sure if it's a gal or guy, but wanted to be in the ambulance service down there, but couldn't afford to pay for the training, so we paid for the training of it. And I think that's helping the community and helping us and everything else.
Absolutely. What's something you would say to anybody that's thinking about joining any of those military organizations that has not yet?
Well, most of them are, like I say, they're a good group of guys. It's kind of like going back to the active duty days. It was camaraderie. I mean, sure, you got some work to do to make things go, but it's nice to be recognized in the community and be able to help the community. Mm-hmm. We've sent over the years. We've sent kids to Boy State, and I think this year we kind of ran short of people that wanted to go, but we've helped pay for the expenses for the Boy State kids. Mm-hmm. And like I say, if you're not too confined to stay home on Memorial Day weekend, we have a program there for about half hour, 45 minutes, and then they serve a meal afterwards. Got to put a plug in for the ladies auxiliary.
Sure. Yeah, they're the backbone.
Yeah, they're a good bunch of gals there too.
And there's also some that will go around to the different cemeteries and do a little ceremony at each cemetery. I remember at our church, actually, it was the day we had that derecho came through. We had those two portions of it in May of 22-ish, I think, is what it was. And we had a bunch of church members that came down there, and we were cleaning up. I don't remember if you were down there at that time or not, but the one of the organizations still came down to the cemetery, which was really cool because everybody stopped work and we all went over there. And it was actually, probably one of the biggest crowds they've had for that, and I think it raised an awareness because you had people coming together to help each other and help our church. And it was kind of neat, because I hadn't gone there before. Shame on me for that. Yeah. But it was nice being there at that time and witnessing that.
Yeah, we've had programs there ever since I joined the Legion down there, and I don't know how many years before, but they've always had a program on the Memorial Day. Mm-hmm. And go to the cemetery and put the wreath at the cemetery, and it's tradition. I guess as you can say, it's tradition.
Right.
We're going to keep doing it as long as we're able to. The biggest problem is getting some of the young people to show up. It's kind of like being in the reserves or in the guard, and this is, everything always happens on the weekend I'm supposed to be drilling.
Right, and it's usually the nicest weekend weather-wise.
Right. But that's part of the sacrifice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we talk about people are so much busier now, they say, but I buy it a little bit. I don't a little bit. You think back, a couple centuries ago, you're pretty dang busy just putting food on your table and a roof to live under. Different types of busyness. I think we choose a little more of our busyness nowadays. Not to take away from young families with kids in sports, but the kids are younger where they're traveling more and things. And it's a great camaraderie thing for families and people getting to know each other, like you're saying. But I think we can still make some time for the important things of the country and patriotism. It can be kind of hard to watch the news and things that are going on in this country. But I'll tell you, I was reading a book Teddy Roosevelt wrote, and even back 100 years ago, they were talking about a stolen election, things of that nature. And the wife and I just saw a war video a couple days ago, and they were talking about some of the similar things. And we're like, I feel like I'm watching today's news. So it's not new things that are going on with our government and things, but just the people taking and making the time for some of these important things that really should be important to everybody in the country.
I agree with you 100%. I know when my kids were smaller, it was running all over all the time, going. And it was kind of a relief when they all got out on their own so you could sit back and relax a little bit.
The empty nesters. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Is there anything else that stands out in your in your military time, whether it be Army, Navy, any specific things that went on during any of your 2-week deployments? Anything stand out in your head?
Not so terribly much. I remember the first 2-weeker I did with the Seabees, and we were in 29 Palms, California, and we were living in A-frame huts, and we had sandstorms, and our galley got blown away, and so we were grabbing our paper plates and going back to the hooch to eat, spitting out sand or whatever. But that was like, okay, it's not the most comfortable place in the world, but it's only here for 2 weeks. You know, like you say, you can stand on your head for 2 weeks, but some of the younger ones, I'm not going to do this anymore. Mm-hmm. But then some of the same guys that said it spent time in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they didn't complain too much then. So
right, yeah, you're tougher than you think you are.
Yeah.
You know, they got the old cliche of what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Well, I got a sign on the front of the bar here. You can't see it down here. It says, whatever doesn't kill you and makes you stronger is a picture of a bear there. And on the right side of the bear side, it says, except for bears. Bears will kill you. Every time I think of doing something hard, having to put up with anything, I think of that sign down there.
Well, I think back, with my uncles in World War II, they didn't, they were getting $13 a day, or a month, I should say, to go swamp through the jungles of all the islands in the Pacific, and then to find out that another uncle was guarding Italian prisoners in Missouri and doing history on that. It's like, we had 3 big German prisoners of war camp in Iowa, not
really?
all that far down the road, So it's, I just never thought about them bringing prisoners this far over.
Right.
Of course, there again, what do you do with thousands of prisoners? But when they brought them back to the States, it's like, wow, just what did they do with them? And then I read an article about this one kid, German POW. He says, I was 125 pounds when I got to Iowa. When they released us, I was 170.
Nice. Yeah, that kind of speaks to our character.
Right.
So did you get a chance to talk with those uncles very much? Were they okay with opening up some, or
they
or how
didn't
much
like to
that?
talk too much about it. They were pretty hush-hush. My dad would say, don't say that, or don't ask this, and okay, whatever. Now Uncle Harley, who was watching POWs in Missouri, he was a little more laid back about it. But then there was no combat involved with him.
Right.
But the two that saw combat in the jungle, they didn't talk a whole lot about it.
Right.
A
Very
few-
common.
Yeah, a few things that were a little funny to them or whatever, but other than, they just, the gruesome stuff that, they didn't talk too much about it.
Yeah, it's like, why would you feel the need to relive that?
Right.
The real terrible things. And each person reacts differently to it as well. So do you remember any of those funny stories you just mentioned?
Well, one of them was about, my uncles came out of North Dakota, but they were with the 147th Artillery, which is South Dakota based.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, we had this Indian kid that was out in the ocean swimming, and a Japanese plane comes down and starts shooting at him, and he starts running to shore, of course, bare ass naked, and then they had to move their gun. They had I don't know if it was what side, maybe an 88 or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so we started pushing that over to get it under camouflage or something. And he says, the kid fell down. We pushed that gun right over the top of his head. And he came up spitting sand, and away
wow.
we went. And that was one that stuck with me.
Wow.
Like,
So he fell when we were pushing it, and
Yeah.
it just went right over
Yeah.
because you guys they were meaning business on moving that
right?
thing.
Yeah. They
Wow.
didn't. But that was one of the funny parts that always hit me. Mm-hmm. And then another place where they put up food on tables in the jungle and tried to get the Japanese to surrender. Finally some of them did, but they were all afraid they were going to get shot.
Just because they were so hungry to
Yeah.
get them to come out.
Right.
And then, I guess you can understand why they'd be hesitant about that, but starvation works on your brain as well, though.
Right.
I hadn't heard anything like that before.
Yeah, they and of course, and again, a couple of things about what we did with the bodies. That it's there was the dirt. The topsoil was 3-4 inches thick, and then it was rock. So all you could do was put them in a pile and burn them.
Right.
Nothing.
Yeah, a lot of sad stories like that. Yes, but overall, you're pretty happy with your career, and
Yeah,
we were talking at after church service last night. Some of the things you were thankful for.
Oh yeah, like I with my TRICARE for life, that saved me a lot of expenses. As far as I had back surgery, and I think I ended up paying $46 for a surgery at the Mayo Clinic. It's unbelievable.
Mm-hmm.
And of course now I'm looking at a couple other things coming up that don't know what that's going to be like, but it's the best thing I ever did as far as staying in the reserves till I got my 20-some years in.
Yeah, because healthcare, I mean, that's the number one thing for, everybody that's even near retirement age, is the major deciding factor on whether they can retire when they want to or not.
Yeah, I like to tell my cousin Joe was always a kidder anyway, and he says, "Well, how's my tax money doing?" So I said, "Thanks, Joe."
Yeah, because I don't know if it's still true, but even back a while, they said like really only about 1% of the population serves in the military. It's pretty. I don't know if it's the same now. I suppose I probably heard that 10, 15 years ago. But when you do raise your hand and sign that dotted line, there's things that you put up with, like we said, that make you stronger, or whatever, if you got the right frame of mind. But there are definitely some benefits. And those benefits weren't always there. I've got an uncle that left the Air Force, went into the Army, which is a little reverse from what usually happens, and served 2 tours in Vietnam. But he was talking about the lack of benefits for the Vietnam vets. And they had actually banded together as a nation and worked in courts to get some of the benefits that we enjoy today. It was kind of interesting hearing some of those stories as well, because when we're looking back at ourselves, we can think that things have been the way they are for a long time. But when you start talking to people that lived those things, and all subjects, pick a subject, this country isn't really that old, and some of these subjects aren't that old. But I am very grateful for the benefits that we have now.
Well, the Legion and the VFW have definitely helped get our benefits up to where they should be.
Mm-hmm.
I hear that most of the guys saying that the Sioux Falls VA hospital is one of the better ones around. So we're blessed with that, having it that close.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. When I was doing stuff with the VA 4 or 5 years ago, in the admin area, they were actually having boxes of paperwork shipped to them from other VAs so that they could help them out, try to help them get caught up. So that's how good ours is in town here. So the medical part and the admin part, I'm very thankful for them.
That's a plus for anybody that needs them.
Mm-hmm.
It's just prescriptions alone, it helps a lot.
Right. Do you visit the Alliance in Sioux Falls, the military alliance, much?
I've only been in there once.
Once.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I don't go to Sioux Falls unless I have to.
Right.
I used to almost live there, working 7 days a week, but I've been there a couple of times, I guess, and they say, well, you got to come out there and have. I think there's certain days of the week that they have meals that are fairly reasonable and stuff like that. But I haven't made it up there yet.
Yeah, that's where I had my retirement. I really like the facility. They have it decorated real nice. Pro-military, obviously, but it's a place for civilians and military people to come together. You know, it's not just for military people. So they advertise that a lot. So if you had some great grandkids sitting right up there by that camera there, what would you like to tell them?
Follow Grandpa. Don't give it up. It's like my daughter. She just retired after 20-some years. Her husband retired about 4 years prior with 20 years. And active duty life is not exactly a fun deal with family.
Right.
My daughter spent a year in Iraq, a year in Kuwait, 2 years in Korea one time, another 15 months in Korea the second time. So you're away from family a lot.
How many kids does she have?
She has 3.
She and her husband have 3.
Yeah. So she's depended on him a lot. He's a heck of a cook. I've partaken of his barbecued beef brisket a few times.
There you go.
Pretty good.
Cool. Yep. Family, faith, country, military. Kind of wind that all together and you can live a pretty good life.
I definitely agree.
Yeah. So, do you have anything else you'd like to say before we exit this?
Go CBs.
Go CB. There you go. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So, when Army and Navy play, you root for Navy?
Yeah.
Do you watch
one
it?
half or the other half. That's a hard one when that happens. Of course, I was at El Paso visiting my daughter, and the Army played El Paso, or that's Texas, and of course they played all the national anthem, of course, and the military songs, and I'm standing up, sitting with all the Army guys, and when the Navy songs plays, I stand up.
There you go.
Well, hey, guy, I stood up for the Army too.
That friendly competition,
Right?
Where different services, you got to razz each other some, but you're all on the same team. But you got your smaller teams as well.
That's correct.
That's part of your having fun with this whole deal.
No.
You bet. All right. Well, thank you for your service and thanks for agreeing to do
Well,
this.
thanks for having me.
Yeah, I
Appreciate
appreciate getting to know you a little bit better.
It's been fun.
All right. Thank you. All right. Thanks for watching.